Hello, I'm here with another hip hop albums discography ranking, and today I'm going to be looking at Notorious B.I.G, aka Biggie Smalls, aka the King of New York, Mr. Smalls, of course, being one of the prominent figures in 90s New York hip hop, popular for the East Coast versus West Coast feud, which took the life of him and Tupac Shakur. Also, just being revered for one of the major you know, storytelling slash mafioso style rappers. Due to the fact that obviously he passed away very young, he didn't release a lot of albums. In fact, only releasing two official albums, which really makes it tricky because I don't want to just discuss two albums for a ranking. I always feel like it should be at least three to be able to make any form of a list. So for that purpose, I'm going to be including posthumous material, of which there is only actually two official posthumous albums. So it's easy enough to just add them and look over them as a whole, have a whole discussion over all the projects released. And obviously the posthumous stuff kind of ranks lower anyway, so it's easy to get those out of the way. Starting with Born Again, released December 1999, at the end of the 90s. A lot of the material released on this album was, for the main parts, unheard by the mainstream audience. It certainly hadn't been made readily available for mainstream consumption, so for the most part it was basically new material. A lot of it was stuff which had already been circulating on the underground, hadn't been released on an official album or anything like that. Tracks like Who Shot You, the notorious, no pun intended, song which helped fuel the East Coast West Coast feud. Dangerous MCs, which takes its verse from the Cuts, Biggie and Busta Rhymes collaboration from Busta's first album, The Coming. Dead Wrong, which appears in a couple of tracks on the album. A lot of these new verses are kind of used up towards the beginning of the album, and towards the end we have more familiar verses from his official releases. And for the most part, it is about just trying to fit in the Biggie verses with more contemporary production and guests. Contemporary in terms of being late 90s, which is only a couple of years after Biggie had passed, but it's still slightly jarring at times. There are occasions where it does feel like Biggie's verses have just been laid on top of a track, and everyone who appears on after or whatever is kind of just trying to play catch up with Biggie's verse, particularly as a lot of the Biggie verses are quite lengthy verses anyway. Only tracks that feature artists who really can match up with him, such as Dead Wrong with Eminem, Rap Phenomenon with Busta, Method Man and Redman, Dangerous MCs with Busta Rhymes, Snoop Dogg, If I Die Before I Wake with Ice Cube and Beanie Sigel. Tracks like these, no artist on here is too bad really, but there are certainly stronger artists on here, and it's just where the stronger tracks appear. I Want to Show You with Casey and JoJo and Nas. there's a Biggie Less track on the album, uh, where Junior Mafia sort of take it over, and as a showcase for them, I can kind of understand why it's on the album. Um, but again, it doesn't actually have Biggie on the track, so maybe it wasn't the wisest inclusion. Anyway, the album itself begins with an eerily prophetic interview with Biggie, talking about how he probably wouldn't live to be, much older than he was at the time. Which kind of goes with the Born Again title, following on from the Ready to Die and Life After Death thematically. Then, a little bit of haunting, Dead Wrong playing in the background. Then leads into the Notorious B.I.G. Song. Dead Wrong then appears after it, which feels a little bit strange, but I guess they wanted to have the big mainstream track with Puff Daddy and Lil Kim on there early on. And it closes with a rather bittersweet message from Valletta Wallace, Biggie's mother, talking about how much he really wanted to make music, and how she would never be able to stop him from making music, even though she really wished that she would have stopped him, because then he would have still been alive today. Which just makes you wonder what, consider the what ifs about Biggie's life and career. What could have been different that would have made him still be alive today? But of course, we'll never know for certain in these situations. But yeah, I mean, a lot of the tracks here are, you can hear the different styles of Biggie throughout. I can see why they chose particular verses to try and showcase all the different aspects of Biggie, but a lot of them you will hear on other albums as well. So we go number 3, Duets, The Final Chapter, released December 2005. Duets is a bit of a bizarre title, as there's the majority of the tracks on here aren't actually duets. They feature several artists on one track, but there is a bit more of a variety of guests on here, even branching out to the likes of a posthumous appearance from Bob Marley and Korn, so getting some reggae and rock involved in there. In terms of a lot of people say that the artists weren't people that Biggie would have worked with, but when you look at who actually is on the album, there are certainly a lot of artists who were around at when Biggie was alive, and he was aware of, even if he didn't necessarily work with them. So Tupac makes a posthumous appearance on there. Snoop Dogg, Mobb Deep, Scarface, Fat Joe, and Big Pun making a posthumous appearance. So there are a lot of artists who actually appear on the album, who Biggie didn't know of, or would have been linked to in some way, even down to Jim Jones and Joel Santana, who Biggie knew Cameron, so this is like they would have known them even if he didn't while he was alive. We begin the album with again a Biggie-less song. It has been said, with Eminem, Diddy, and Obi Trice talking about Biggie's influence on their careers and on hip hop as a whole, and the price of fame of being a major hip hop star. So in that terms of that introduction, it kind of works not having Biggie on it, as it just introduces the album. Later on, I'm With Whatever, which also doesn't feature Biggie on it, which feels a bit more jarring. Lil Wayne and Joel Santana do fine on the verses, and Jim Jones appears to say the intro and outro. But it still feels a little bit strange that we get that far into the album and suddenly Biggie doesn't appear on the song. But anyway, there's a lot of tracks which are kind of just remakes essentially of older tracks. Speak Your Game is basically an updated version of Notorious Thugs. Crazy Bone from Bone Thugs and Harmony even appears on there, along with Twister to match with the rapid fire style. Beef, just an updated What's Beef with Mobb Deep on there. But we do get a lot of different styles, from the more upbeat Living the Life and a Nasty Girl to the Paranoid Living in Pain with Tupac, Nas and Mary J. Blige. One of the songs which doesn't feature a particularly familiar verse, so it feels even more refreshing, similar to Hustler's Story, with Akon providing the chorus and the verse, like when Akon was more street orientated. So, the songs which have newer verses certainly feel the more fresher on the album than the verses which we have heard and are quite familiar with up to this point. But still, towards the end particularly, we get more of the darker material. It kind of livens itself up a little bit, ironically, from the Suicidal Thoughts remake Hold Your Head with Bob Marley, Just a Memory with Clips, and Wake Up with Korn. It's a very haunting yet heavy track. Kind of takes it almost to a breaking point before ending with Valletta Wallace's ending poem. Scattered throughout the album, we have vocal appearances from Biggie's children and Lil C's, people that knew him really well, just to discuss his legacy on hip hop, and just about how much talk about the human behind the persona of Biggie Smalls. So, in terms of more of a variety of styles and guests, this one kind of goes up a bit above Born Again, but again, a lot of the material is stuff that is quite well worn. All the unreleased material had evidently been used by this point, so is kind of, if you want the real Biggie Smalls, it's kind of better to go for the official albums released during his lifetime, which we are going to move on to right now. Now, both of the albums are very strong, and it's kind of difficult to choose between the two of them. Although I always kind of lean more towards putting Ready to Die at number 2. So Ready to Die, September 1994, first album, a brilliant debut album, just in terms of the actual structure of the album, beginning from the intro skit with his birth, looking through a short snippet of his life, being a child, not having a father there for him, then moving into a life of crime and being released from prison, which then bleeds into the Dr. Dre sampling Things and Change, where Biggie talks more about his life growing up and how things are different now that he's an adult and he's got more things to be concerned about. The worries about issues like his mother having breast cancer, for example. From there we move on to more of the in terms structurally for the album. A lot of the earlier tracks were actually recorded earlier, due to being the difference between the two kind of main recording sessions of the album, where the first bit was recorded when Puff Daddy was at Uptown, and then the break between him leaving Uptown and creating Bad Boy Records, and then went to record the rest of the album then to be able to have a label to put it on. So a lot of the older tracks are more produced by Easy Mo B, have more of a street hardcore feel, have a more of a hungry, desperate sound from Biggie. Whereas later on in the album, we have more of the polished, smoother, commercial sounding tracks, where Biggie just sounds smoother, more calm, relaxed, controlled. So in that's kind of break of the album, there are certainly tracks in both halves of it which kind of feel a little bit similar to some of the other ones. So it's kind of why it does, while it is a great album thematically, it does kind of go down a little bit, I feel, for that reason, even though there are some really strong tracks on there. I mean, Everyday Struggle, one of the strongest tracks Biggie has ever released, just discussing even more about his life and the things he has to go through to try and get to try and achieve things in his life. The Method Man appearing for The What, being the only rap appearance on the album. The two of them going bar for bar with each other. You can kind of apparently Biggie had to rewrite his verses to match up with Method Man. So in terms of that lyrical sparring, it's very interesting to hear those two go at each other. With the more commercial sounding P. Diddy and the Hitmen, the more commercial samples appearing on tracks like Juicy with the Juicy Fruit sample, One More Chance, Big Papa, obviously the big main singles there. The mournful love track, Me and My Bitch, the Diana King appearing for the Jamaican influenced Respect, and all the way to the end where after the DJ Premier produced Bars track Unbelievable, we end with Suicidal Thoughts, where the difference between this and Hold Your Head is being the verse just playing out as one full we'll say conversation, because discussing these issues with Puff Daddy on the end of the telephone, but it's basically a monologue. So in that sense, sometimes it feels a little bit weird when Puff Daddy's saying things on the end of the phone and B's clearly not answering what he's saying, but it does also kind of work as a final monologue before eventually Biggie does succumb to all of the feelings that he's have, all the pressure that he's facing, and pulls the trigger and kills himself. When you can hear the final heartbeat of Biggie, which again, if you did actually shoot yourself in the head, I'm pretty sure your heart would stop instantly. But it's a very cool audio effect to have those final heartbeats before just ending the album off like that. So starting from his birth until his death, and essentially making it a chronological journey through. Again, structurally the album is incredible, and there's a lot of great tracks on here, some really classic bars, and some Biggie's very good at being able to again just describe everything that he's going through or experiencing on his tracks, as we will see again on the next album, Life After Death, released just after Biggie died in March 1997. So it begins from where Razor Die left off, right at the end of Suicidal Thoughts, with Biggie killing himself, and then Puff Daddy talking essentially to his dying body as it's going for its final beeps on the flatliner. Um, Again, if we're taking the story at face value, Biggie had already died at the end of Suicidal Thoughts and the Razor Die album, but this is life after death, so it's a while not officially Biggie's resurrection, thematically it is, as we go through like 25 tracks over 2 discs, so a very expansive look at Biggie as a whole. There's not much on here which really drags or takes the album down. So in terms of having this amount of tracks on the album, and considering this would be the last proper album that Biggie released, it kind of justifies having this amount of songs on the album. From everywhere from leading into the first official track, Somebody's Gotta Die, where again Biggie describes going out and performing a hit on somebody who's talking reckless about or whatever, and just all the details that he goes through over this very eerie sounding beat. Just all the different styles of Biggie appearing on here. The confident brags on Hypnotize and Kicking the Door. The more funky West Coast influenced styles on Going Back to Cali. Another a funky Kiss You Off track between him and Lil' Kim. The more sinister sounding Bone Thugs and Harmony collaboration on Notorious Thugs, where Biggie has to speed up his flow to match up with Bone Thugs. Again, there's more rap guests and other guests on the album, but they all play their part really well. So in terms of helping introduce newer artists such as Mace on More Money More Problems, Jay-Z on I Love the Dough, Lox on Last Day. R. Kelly appears there on the smooth Fuck You Tonight. There's the mournful, ironically kind of tribute track to a friend of his, Miss You, with 112. Was kind of in a way a bit of a precursor, ironically, to his own tribute song, I'll Be Missing You. P. Diddy would release later in the year with 112 and Faith Evans. Then towards the end of disc 2, we get again more of that eerie, haunting sound with the Paranoid My Downfall, featuring some of B's best verses, particularly that first verse, which is one of his finest verses because Puff Daddy used it over and over again, but needless to say, in its original context, it really is gripping. Same with Long Kiss Goodnight. Just the taunts and things over the haunting RZA beat, ending with You're Nobody Till Somebody Kills You. Looking at death again, and what happens to people after they die, if they're whether they're remembered, and ironically, for an artist who pretty much became even more famous after his passing, but it's still a very a good exploration of death and its effects on people and people surrounding people who die. Just a lot to a lot to go through on the album, a lot to process, but some very strong stuff on there. Biggie showing some more of a crooner style of vocals on Another and Player Hater, a bit of an indication of perhaps what he could have done had he had more time on Earth. And yeah, I mean, it's obviously it's very difficult to kind of look at things in the aspect of just having those two official albums and thinking about what could have happened if this hadn't been the end for him. If the albums like Born Again had actually been proper bigger releases that he had been able to make himself. Would his style have continued in the vein of Raise the Dying, Laugh After Death? Would he have tried to change his style more, try and fit in different styles, maybe to sound more like what would actually appear in terms of production and content on tracks on albums like Born Again and duets. But of course, we'll never actually know what would have happened to Biggie's career had he lived any longer than he did. And it's just great that we have all this material here that we can go over. Again, obviously the stronger stuff is on the first two albums, but even on the posthumous releases, every track does feel like a celebration of Biggie's talent and his legacy. So it's still good that we managed to get as much material on it, released or unreleased or re-released or however, so we can go over it and continue to revere Biggie as one of the best in terms of hip hop history, because he was and should still be considered as such. So that's that. And yeah, what I can say for that is look out for more to be coming very soon. We'll make more of these. Got some more coming up on the way. Some more big artists. So just watch out.